In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
In the 41st millennium, there is only war. 1,000,000 worlds burn in the Emperor's name, and faith reshapes reality itself with every prayer uttered by countless billions. The Imperium had seen horrors that would shatter lesser civilizations, demons clawing through reality, alien swarms devouring planets, traitor legions wielding blasphemous sorcery. Yet nothing in 10,000 years of recorded history prepared them for what fell from the warp above Forge World Metallicus Prime. No ship preceded it, no distress beacon, no warp signature that matched any known classification in the Mechanicus archives. Just a man in black armor, falling through the void like a dark star, surrounded by twisted metal that had once been something else entirely, something that obeyed different laws of physics, constructed with principles that made the tech priest's augmetic eyes twitch with incomprehension. Magos Explorator Yazarian Delta 7 watched through the orbital station's view screen as servitors struggled to describe what their sensors detected. Life signs confirmed, Magos, one reported in binaric cant. Cybernetic enhancement, extensive, pattern unknown, warp taint, negative. Psyker signature, anomalous. Recommend immediate quarantine protocol. The figure hit Metallicus Prime's northern ash wastes at terminal velocity. Impact crater, 40 meters wide. Estimated survival probability, 0.03%. 2 hours later, the figure walked out of the crater. Darth Vader surveyed this alien world with mounting confusion, masked by cold discipline. The Force felt wrong, distant, like trying to breathe through water instead of air. His connection remained, but distorted, as if the fundamental fabric of this universe operated on different principles. Every breath through his respirator echoed louder than usual, his life support systems straining against environmental factors they weren't designed to filter. The landscape spoke of industry taken to religious extremes. Towering manufactorums belched smoke into a gray sky. Massive cathedrals of brass and steel stretched toward the heavens, their architecture simultaneously advanced and baroque, covered in skulls, eagles, and Gothic script his systems couldn't translate. The air tasted of promethium exhaust, machine oil, and something else, the metallic tang of faith made manifest. 30 Skitarii Rangers emerged from the ash dunes, their mechanical augmentations whirring as they formed a firing line. Their leader spoke through a vox grill. Unidentified entity, you stand upon sacred ground of the Omnissiah. Identify yourself, or face deletion. Vader's vocabulator crackled. I am Lord Vader. Lower your weapons. The response was las fire and radium rounds. Crimson bolts splashed against an invisible barrier as Vader raised one hand, the Force coalescing into a shield despite its strange behavior. The bullets hung suspended in midair. I warned you. He clenched his fist. The telekinetic wave sent half the Skitarii tumbling backward, their augmetic limbs sparking. The rest adjusted with machine precision, spreading out, coordinating fire patterns. Vader's lightsaber ignited with its familiar snap hiss. He moved through their formation like death incarnate. Each strike precise and economical. Limbs separated from torsos, weapons cleaved in half. He deflected last bolts with casual efficiency, though his precognition felt sluggish, his danger sense muffled. The last Skitarii transmitted before Vader's blade found its processing unit. Unknown entity, extreme threat, recommend inquisitorial intervention. The Omnissiah protects. Vader deactivated his blade and examined the fallen. Their augmentations were crude compared to his cybernetics, yet possessed strange reverence in construction. Every component bore inscriptions, prayers etched into steel, These people worshipped their technology. In the distance, klaxons wailed. Somewhere in the fortress monastery dominating the horizon, priests scrambled to understand what had breached their perimeter. Above, an inquisitorial vessel investigating the warp anomaly adjusted course. Vader began walking toward the Forge Cathedral, each step deliberate. He would find answers. He would find a way home. And if this Imperium stood in his way, he would remind them what it meant to face a Dark Lord of the Sith. Behind him, the twisted wreckage of his escape pod, the last remnants of an Imperial Star Destroyer's bridge section, cooled in the crater, already swarmed by servitor recovery teams who whispered prayers as they approached technology that defied understanding. The 41st millennium had just encountered something it had no classification for. A man who had already fallen to darkness in another universe, carrying powers that operated on principles neither psyker nor sorcery, neither Xenos nor human. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions where competence meets grimdark brutality, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the Dark Millennium, the Inquisitorial Black Ship. Eternal vigilance descended through Metallicus Prime's atmosphere like a falling cathedral, its hull bristling with weapon batteries and sanctified armor plating. Inquisitor Cassian Vor stood in the observation deck, his power-armored form rigid as he studied the pict feeds transmitted from the Forge world below. 37 Skitarii casualties, no survivors, his interrogator reported, her augmetic eye whirring as it processed data streams. The entity moved with precision, suggesting military training. Energy blade of unknown classification cut through blessed ceramite like parchment. Telekinetic abilities consistent with Alpha Plus Psyker rating, yet the entity registers no presence in the warp whatsoever. Vor's scarred face remained impassive, but his mind raced through possibilities. A blank. No, blanks nullified psychic phenomena. They didn't wield it. A Xenos. The figure's silhouette appeared humanoid, a demon masking its nature. Impossible to maintain such deception against Mechanicus augur arrays. Where is it now? Approaching Forge Cathedral Primus, Magos Yazrian has sealed the structure and activated defense servitors. He requests your immediate presence before he's forced to enact exterminatus protocols on his own facility. Vor allowed himself a thin smile. The Mechanicus was terrified. Good. Fear sharpened the mind. Inside the Forge Cathedral, Vader walked through corridors that defied logic and aesthetics in equal measure. Pipes thicker than buildings ran along walls carved with prayers in High Gothic. Servitors, half-human slaves bound to machinery, shuffled past on automated routines, their dead eyes not even registering his presence. The stench of sacred oils and incense couldn't mask the underlying smell of recycled flesh and suffering. This place reminded him of Imperial installations, but corrupted through 10,000 years of religious obsession. The Empire had been brutal and efficient. This Imperium seemed brutal and fanatical, a critical distinction. His danger sense flared. Vader ignited his lightsaber as heavy bolter fire erupted from concealed turrets. The explosive rounds hammered against his force barrier, each impact requiring more concentration than it should. The warp's interference continued to strain his connection, forcing him to consciously reinforce abilities that once came as naturally as breathing. He raised his hand and crushed the turrets with focused telekinesis, metal shrieking as it compacted into useless scrap. Combat servitors emerged from side chambers, chain blades revving, their cybernetic bodies lurching forward with single-minded aggression. Vader moved through them systematically, his lightsaber carved through their armored torsos, the blade's molecular disruption field easily parting their augmetics. One servitor managed to swing its chain blade close enough that Vader felt the weapon's teeth scrape against his force shield before he bisected it with a horizontal slash. "Enough," he commanded, his voice amplified through his vocabulator to fill the cathedral space. "I did not come here to slaughter your servants. Send someone with authority to speak." Silence answered him. Then, echoing through vox speakers built into the cathedral walls, came a voice distorted by mechanical filtering. "I am Magos Yazrian Delta 7, fabricator locum of Metallicus Prime. You desecrate sacred ground with unknown technology and impossible powers. The Inquisition arrives within the hour. You will be examined, categorized, and if necessary, purged." Vader extinguished his blade. "I am no heretic of your Imperium. I am simply displaced. Your origin is irrelevant. You killed servants of the Omnissiah. You wield powers that defy theological classification. You are either Xenos, mutant, or demon. All three warrant death." Before Vader could respond, the cathedral's great doors exploded inward. Inquisitor Vor strode through the breach, flanked by a squad of stormtroopers in carapace armor and a tech priest carrying an auspex scanner that crackled with nervous energy. Vor's power sword remained sheathed, but his bolt pistol was drawn and aimed with casual confidence at Vader's chest. "I am Inquisitor Cassian Vor of the Ordo Xenos. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, you will submit to interrogation or be destroyed. Choose quickly." Vader assessed the threat. The Inquisitor radiated authority and dangerous competence. His soldiers held their weapons with professional discipline. More importantly, Vader could sense something through the Force, a weight of conviction so absolute it bordered on madness. These were true believers willing to die without hesitation. "Your Emperor means nothing to me," Vader said slowly. "But I will answer your questions if you answer mine in return." Vor's eye twitched. Several stormtroopers inhaled sharply at the blasphemy. The Inquisitor raised a hand, forestalling their outrage. Bold words from something that fell screaming from the warp. "Very well. We shall conduct this interrogation properly. You will accompany us to the Eternal Vigilance. Any resistance will be met with lethal force, followed by molecular incineration of your remains." Vader considered his options. He was alone in an unknown universe with depleting resources. His lightsaber's power cell would eventually fail without access to appropriate technology. His life support required maintenance he couldn't perform here. And the Force, his greatest weapon, fought against him with every use in this warp-saturated reality. Strategic retreat wasn't surrender. It was reconnaissance. "Lead the way, Inquisitor." Vor's expression revealed nothing, but Vader sensed surprise through the Force. The man had expected resistance. Good. Let them underestimate him while he learned the rules of this new game. As they marched toward the black ship, Vader caught his first glimpse through a cathedral viewport of the planet's true scale. Forge complexes stretched to the horizon, belching smoke and fire. Massive orbital platforms hung in the void like artificial moons. And everywhere, were symbols of the Aquila, the two-headed eagle that seemed to be this Imperium's mark. He had served one empire that spanned a galaxy. Now he would understand this Imperium that claimed to rule 1,000,000 worlds. And then he would decide whether to destroy it, exploit it, or bend it to his will. Behind them, Magos Yazrian watched through surveillance feeds, his mechanical mind racing with theological questions that threatened to corrupt his holy binaries with doubt. The interrogation chamber aboard the Eternal Vigilance was designed to break the will of demons, Xenos warlords, and heretical psychers. Sanctified chains hung from walls, inscribed with protective wards. Purity seals covered every surface. A psychic hood hummed with anti-warp frequencies that made even Vor's non-psyker mind ache. At the chamber's center, Vader sat in restraints designed to hold a Chaos Space Marine. He had allowed them to bind him. Another calculation, another piece of reconnaissance. Vor circled the Dark Lord slowly, his Auspex scanner chirping incomprehensibly. Your armor is not of any known Xenos origin. The metallurgy is wrong, too precise, too clean. No ritualistic elements, no prayers for the machine spirit. He tapped Vader's chest plate with one armored finger. This was made by a civilization that viewed technology as a tool, not a god. Heretical, but not chaotic. Your observations are correct, Vader replied, his vocabulator steady despite the psychic hood's pressure. I come from a galaxy far beyond your Imperium's reach, a place where your gods do not exist. The tech priest attending Vor made a strangled binary screech. The Inquisitor silenced him with a gesture. Impossible. The God Emperor's light reaches all corners of reality. The warp connects everything. There is no beyond. And yet, here I stand. Vor leaned closer, his eyes searching Vader's mask for any tell, any weakness. Your powers. Demonstrate them. Now. Vader reached out through the Force, feeling its strange texture in this universe. Where once the Force flowed like a river, here it felt like pushing through tar, thick, resistant, contaminated by something else. The warp he had begun to understand was not the Force. It was something older, more chaotic, fundamentally corrupted. The Force was balance between light and dark, life and death, order and entropy. The warp was madness given form, emotion made manifest, belief twisted into reality. His connection to the Force allowed him to manipulate this universe's physical laws, but doing so meant touching the edges of the warp, like using a clean tool in contaminated water. He lifted Vor's bolt pistol from its holster with a gesture. The weapon floated through the air, rotating slowly, then settled into Vader's outstretched palm despite the restraints. Every weapon in the room immediately aimed at his head. Vader released the pistol, letting it clatter to the floor. I can move objects with thought, sense danger before it strikes, influence weak minds. These abilities do not come from your warp. They come from something you have no name for. The tech priest frantically adjusted his scanning equipment. Magos-level analysis indicates localized reality distortion, consistent with Theta-class psychic manifestation, but the warp remains calm. No ripples, no demon presence. The phenomenon originates from the subject himself, not drawn from the Imperium. This is, theoretically, impossible. Many things are impossible until they occur, Vader observed. He tested his restraints, not to escape, but to gauge their strength. Adequate for normal prisoners. Insufficient for him if he chose violence. Your Imperium fascinates me, Inquisitor. You wage war across 1,000,000 worlds in the name of a dead god. Vor's backhand strike came faster than human reflexes should allow. Vader's head snapped to the side, his vocabulator crackling. The God Emperor is not dead. He sits upon the golden throne, guiding humanity through the darkness. His sacrifice sustains our species. Show respect or lose your tongue. Vader turned his head back slowly, deliberately. Through the Force, he felt the Inquisitor's absolute conviction, not blind faith, but certainty forged through decades of witnessing miracles and horrors in equal measure. This man had seen his Emperor's power manifest, believed with his entire soul. It reminded Vader uncomfortably of his own service to Palpatine. How long had he believed his master's lies? How many atrocities had he justified? I served an Emperor once, Vader said quietly. I believed his vision would bring order to the galaxy, peace through strength, security through control. He paused, mechanical breaths filling the silence. I was wrong. He used me, corrupted me, took everything I loved and twisted it into a weapon. Vor's expression shifted slightly, not sympathy but recognition. And yet you still wear the armor, still carry the title, still walk the path of darkness. Because the alternative is weakness, the galaxy respects only power. Then you already understand the Imperium's truth, Vor said, gesturing to the tech priest who began disconnecting monitoring equipment. Humanity survives not through mercy or hope, but through endless war. We burn 1,000 psychers daily to keep the Emperor's light burning. We sacrifice entire worlds to stop chaos's spread. We show no quarter to Xenos, mutant, or heretic. His voice dropped to something almost conversational. You think us fanatics. Perhaps we are. But fanaticism is all that stands between humanity and extinction. Vader absorbed this. The Imperium of man was what the Galactic Empire might have become, given 10,000 years of total war. Bureaucratic stagnation, religious indoctrination, technological regression disguised as sacred tradition. Yet they survived against threats that would have shattered Palpatine's regime in months. Your powers interest me, Vor continued, beginning to pace. Not warp-derived, yet effective. Controlled, precise. The Imperium has use for such weapons. Serve the Emperor. Prove your loyalty through action. Or refuse, and I will have you dissected by the Mechanicus to understand how your alien biology functions. I serve no one. Everyone serves something, Lord Vader. The question is whether you choose your master or have one chosen for you. Before Vader could respond, alarms shrieked through the black ship. Red emergency lighting bathed the interrogation chamber. Vor's Vox bead crackled. Inquisitor, warp breach detected at system edge. Identifying signature. Throne of Terra. It's a Chaos Warfleet. 8 cruisers bearing the mark of the Black Legion. They're making for Metallicus Prime. Vor's expression hardened into pure military focus. He looked at Vader with cold calculation. Chaos comes. Traitors who sold their souls to the dark gods for power and immortality. They will kill every living thing on this world and sacrifice their souls to demons. He drew a knife, moving behind Vader. So here is your choice, Lord Vader. Fight with us and prove you're not chaos-tainted, or die here in chains while the world burns. The restraints fell away as Vor cut through them. Vader stood, towering over the Inquisitor, his presence filling the chamber with barely contained menace. Tell me where the enemy is, Vader said, igniting his lightsaber. Its crimson glow reflected off the sanctified walls. And I will show you what true power looks like. Vor smiled, a predator's expression with no warmth. Welcome to the 41st millennium, Lord Vader. I hope you survive your first day. The Eternal Vigilance shuddered as it broke orbit, its ancient engines roaring to life with a chorus of machine spirit prayers from the Enginarium crew. Vader stood in the observation deck, watching the void fill with vessels bearing the marks of his new enemy. 8 cruisers, each the size of a small city, their hulls corrupted by what Vor had called the ruinous powers. Chaos. Even from this distance, Vader could sense something wrong about those ships. The Force recoiled from them like flesh from flame. Whatever tainted those vessels operated on principles antithetical to natural order, not merely dark, but fundamentally corrupted. The Black Legion, Vor explained, standing beside him with arms crossed. Traitors who rebelled against the Emperor 10,000 years ago. Once they were the finest warriors humanity ever produced, the Luna Wolves, later renamed the Sons of Horus. Now they're damned souls wearing power armor, sustained by warp energy and the favor of chaos gods. Vader processed this. A civil war 10 millennia old, still burning. The galactic civil war had seemed endless at 3 years. What do these gods offer that would make warriors betray their emperor? Power, immortality, freedom from human limitation. Vor's voice dripped with contempt. The Chaos Gods are emotion made manifest, rage, despair, excess, and ambition given form in the warp. They whisper to the weak, promise everything, deliver damnation. The lead Chaos Cruiser, a vessel that seemed to writhe with organic corruption across its hull, launched boarding pods toward Metallicus Prime's orbital platforms. Vader watched defense turrets vaporize dozens of pods, but hundreds more crashed through the station's shields. They'll slaughter the workers, Vor muttered. Sacrifice them to open warp rifts. Use their blood to summon demons. He activated his Vox link. All hands, combat stations. Prepare boarding repulsion protocols. If they breach our hull, fall back to sanctified zones and... They won't breach your hull, Vader interrupted. He turned from the viewport, his cape swirling. You have a smaller assault craft, something fast. Vor studied him with calculating eyes. You want to board their flagship, alone. I have destroyed capital ships before. Your enemies will be no different. These aren't stormtroopers or battle droids, Vor warned. Chaos Space Marines are 8-foot-tall demigods in ceramite armor. Each one is worth 100 normal soldiers. They've fought for 10,000 years. They feel no fear, no mercy, no doubt. Vader's vocabulator carried the ghost of dark amusement. Then they will die without learning better. Something in Vor's expression shifted. Reassessment, perhaps even respect. The Thunderhawk in Bay 7. I'll assign you a squad of my stormtroopers. I work alone. Then you'll die alone. This is the 41st millennium, Lord Vader. Pride is the first step toward chaos corruption. Vor leaned closer. Besides, I need witnesses to confirm you're not compromised by warp exposure. Standard procedure. Vader considered this. The Inquisitor was testing him, certainly, but also protecting an asset. Logical. Very well, but they follow my orders without question. Oh, they will. I've promised them execution if they don't. 20 minutes later, Vader stood in the Thunderhawk's troop bay as the assault craft screamed toward the Chaos flagship despoiler's fang. 5 stormtroopers in carapace armor occupied the opposite bench, their hellguns held with white-knuckle discipline. Sergeant Kavik, a scarred veteran with augmetic eyes, kept glancing at Vader with poorly concealed unease. Never seen anyone volunteer to board a Chaos vessel, Kavik muttered. Usually takes a direct order and a barrel to the head. Your fear is warranted, Vader replied, checking his lightsaber's power cell. 83% remaining. He would need to be efficient. But unnecessary. Fear breeds hesitation. Hesitation breeds death. You sound like a commissar. Kavik managed a grim smile. Just when we're aboard, don't listen to anything you hear. Chaos whispers lies, promises, shows you things that aren't real, gets inside your head. Vader had faced the dark side's temptations for decades. Palpatine's manipulations, the whispers during his transformation on Mustafar, his own guilt weaponized against him night after night. I have experience with corruption, Sergeant. Your chaos holds nothing I haven't already survived. The Thunderhawk's pilot voxed back. 60 seconds to breach. Their point defense is lighting us up, but the blessed armor holds. For the Emperor. For the Emperor, the stormtroopers echoed. Vader said nothing. He reached out through the Force, extending his senses toward the Chaos vessel. Immediately he recoiled. The ship wasn't just tainted, it was alive with wrongness. Souls screaming in the bulkheads. Flesh fused with metal. And underneath it all, something vast and hungry watching, interested in this new presence that tasted of darkness, yet remained uncorrupted. A voice slithered through his mind, different from anything he'd experienced. Not words, but impressions, emotions made language. Welcome, Broken One. Welcome, fallen lord. We see what you are, what you could become. Join us. Serve true gods, not dead corpses on golden chairs. We offer power without chains, vengeance without limits, everything you desire. No. Vader's mental rebuke detonated outward with force-augmented will. The presence flinched back, surprised by resistance from something it had expected to seduce easily. The Thunderhawk's boarding drill screamed as it tore through the Chaos Cruiser's hull. Atmosphere vented explosively. Then the assault ramp dropped, and Vader walked into hell made manifest. The corridor beyond defied sanity. Walls breathed, faces pressed outward from metal surfaces, mouths working in silent screams. Blood ran upward, defying gravity. The air stank of copper and burned meat and something sweet that made human minds bend toward madness. The stormtroopers activated their rebreathers and raised their weapons. Kavik whispered prayers to the Emperor. Vader simply ignited his lightsaber and began walking deeper into the ship. They found the first Chaos Space Marines 3 corridors in. 2 of them, armor painted midnight black with gold trim, the 8-pointed star of chaos emblazoned on their chest plates. They stood 9 feet tall in their corrupted warplate, bolters already raised. More slaves for the pyre, one growled, his voice distorted by millennia of warp exposure. Vader raised his hand. The Force seized both traitors and slammed them against the ceiling with enough force to crack their ancient ceramite. They dropped, stunned, and Vader was upon them before they recovered. His lightsaber carved through helmet seals, ending threats that had terrorized entire sectors. Sergeant Kavik stared at the corpses of warriors he'd been trained to fear as unkillable gods. Emperor's mercy, what are you? Vader looked back at him, crimson blade humming, black armor splattered with traitor blood. I am what your Imperium needs me to be, Sergeant. Now come, we have a ship to destroy. Deeper in the despoiler's fang, a Chaos Sorcerer felt the deaths of his brothers and smiled beneath his horned helmet. Finally, something interesting. The despoiler's fang fought back like a living thing. Bulkheads sealed without warning, attempting to trap Vader and his squad in compartments that grew teeth from the walls. Servitor corpses animated by demonic possession lurched from maintenance shafts, their dead eyes weeping blood. The ship itself seemed aware of the intruders, reshaping corridors to lead them in circles, flooding sections with nerve gas that Vader dissipated with force barriers. Sergeant Kavik and his stormtroopers fought with admirable discipline, their hellguns cutting down possessed crew and lesser cultists. But Vader could sense their terror mounting with every step deeper into corruption. The warp pressed against their minds, seeking cracks, whispering personal hells tailored to each man's deepest fears. Keep moving, Vader commanded, his lightsaber carving through a blast door that had sealed behind them. Fear gives them power. Deny them your weakness. Easy for you to say, one trooper gasped, his rebreather misting with panicked breathing. You're not even human, are you? Some kind of weapon the Inquisitor found. Vader paused mid-stride. The trooper immediately realized his mistake, but Vader simply continued forward. I am more human than you know, and less than I once was. Now silence. We're being watched. The corridor ahead opened into a vast chamber that had once been a strategium, but now resembled a temple to madness. Chains hung from the vaulted ceiling, each ending in a screaming soul that existed somewhere between life and death. Symbols carved into the floor glowed with sickly green light. And at the chamber's center, standing beside a hololithic display showing Metallicus Prime's orbital defenses, stood a figure in Baroque power armor painted the color of old blood. The Chaos Sorcerer turned to face them, his helmet adorned with curling horns. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made reality ripple. Welcome, stranger. I am Vexaron the thrice damned, and I have been waiting for you." Kavik and his men immediately opened fire. Lost bolts and hellgun rounds splashed against a shimmering barrier of warp energy, absorbed without effect. Vexaron didn't even glance at them. "Dismiss your pets, Fallen One. This conversation is between us." Vader gestured, and the stormtroopers reluctantly fell back toward the chamber entrance, maintaining defensive positions. He deactivated his lightsaber, but kept his hand near the hilt. "You expected me. The warp shows many futures. In most, you die aboard this ship. In some, you flee, but in a precious few." Vexaron's helmet tilted, and Vader sensed the smile beneath it. "In a precious few, you finally understand what you truly are, what you could become." "I understand enough. You're a traitor empowered by entities that feed on souls." "Traitor?" Vexaron laughed, and the sound carried the screams of 1,000 dying worlds. "We were loyal once, loyal to an emperor who lied to us, who used us as weapons and tools, who promised enlightenment while hiding the truth of the universe. When we learned that truth, that gods existed, that power beyond imagining waited in the warp, we chose freedom over slavery." Vader felt the familiar tug of manipulation. This was Palpatine's work all over again. Truth mixed with lies. Promises of power wrapping chains around the desperate. "Freedom. You're slaves to your gods. I can sense them watching through your eyes." "And what are you, Lord Vader?" Vexaron gestured, and the hololithic display shifted, showing images that shouldn't be possible. Scenes from Vader's past. Mustafar burning, Padme dying, Palpatine's lightning. A slave in armor, bound by duty to a master who destroyed everything you loved. You served an emperor who twisted your nobility into a weapon, who promised you could save your wife, then ensured her death, who kept you chained with pain and guilt for decades. Vader's hand clenched, the force rippling outward with barely controlled rage. "Choose your next words carefully, sorcerer. I speak only truth. The Chaos Gods see all, know all. They showed me your history the moment you entered this system. They see your potential." Vexaron's gauntleted hand extended in offering. "The ruinous powers do not lie about what they offer. Khorne would grant you strength to crush any enemy. Tzeentch would give you knowledge to reshape reality itself. Nurgle would end your pain, free you from that prison of burned flesh and failing machinery. And Slaanesh," he chuckled darkly, "Slaanesh would return what you lost. Love, sensation, everything stolen from you on Mustafar." For one terrible moment, Vader felt the pull, not toward any specific god, but toward the promise of freedom from decades of agony. His respirator clicked steadily, reminding him of every breath that required machinery, every moment trapped in this armor. Then he remembered who had made these promises before, who had sworn to save Padme, then engineered her death, who had promised power, then delivered only servitude. "Your gods are not unique," Vader said coldly. "I've heard these lies before." Palpatine whispered the same promises: power, salvation, freedom from fear and death. Every word was poison wrapped in truth. "He taught me well, sorcerer, well enough to recognize his techniques in your masters." Vexaron's posture shifted, surprise leaking through his warp-sustained confidence. "You refuse? After everything stolen from you, you would remain bound to suffering." "I refuse to trade one master for another." Vader ignited his lightsaber, its crimson glow reflecting off the chamber's corrupted surfaces. "I am Darth Vader. I serve no emperor, no god, no cosmic power. I am my own master now, and you are in my way." The Chaos Sorcerer sighed, almost sounding disappointed. "Then you are a fool, but a dangerous fool. The gods will enjoy breaking you properly." He raised his staff, and reality itself began to tear. Demons poured through the rips in space, lesser entities of pure warp energy, all claws and teeth and impossible geometry. They moved in ways that hurt to perceive, shrieking in voices that bypassed ears and stabbed directly into minds. Vader met them with the Force. Telekinetic waves shattered 3 demons into dispersing energy. His lightsaber carved through 2 more, the blade's physical disruption somehow effective against their non-physical forms. The stormtroopers opened fire, their blessed ammunition finding targets. But more kept coming. Vexaron laughed and channeled more power, his sorcery pulling greater demons from the warp. The chamber filled with madness incarnate. Vader reached deep into the Force, fighting against the warp's interference, and pulled. The ceiling collapsed, tons of corrupted metal crashing down on half the demons. He gestured again, and a support pillar tore free, becoming a battering ram that smashed through Vexaron's defensive barrier. The sorcerer stumbled, his concentration broken. The demonic horde wavered. "Impossible," Vexaron snarled. "Your power doesn't draw from the warp. How can you—" Vader was already moving. His lightsaber took Vexaron's staff hand at the wrist. The sorcerer screamed, warp energy erupting from the wound. Vader kicked him backward into the hololithic display, shattering ancient technology. "You want to know my power source?" Vader loomed over the fallen traitor. "It comes from discipline. From will unbroken by gods or masters. Your chaos offers only slavery disguised as freedom." He drove his blade through Vexaron's chest, piercing both hearts. The Chaos Sorcerer's death scream echoed across multiple dimensions as his soul was torn into the warp, claimed by the very gods he had served. The remaining demons shrieked and dissipated, their anchor to reality severed. Sergeant Kavik approached cautiously, staring at Vader with something between awe and terror. You resisted a Chaos Sorcerer's temptation, killed him in single combat. Emperor's throne, what are you?" Vader looked at his lightsaber, its blade still humming. "I am a weapon that chooses its own targets, Sergeant. Now show me this ship's reactor. It's time to leave." The journey to Terra took 3 weeks through the warp. 3 weeks of Vader, learning to hate faster than light travel in this cursed universe. The Imperium was nothing like hyperspace. Where hyperspace was predictable, mathematics, and calculated routes, the warp was chaos incarnate, a screaming ocean of emotion and madness where physics itself became negotiable. He spent those weeks in meditation, studying his Force connection's behavior in this reality. The interference he'd initially felt was the warp itself, an entire dimension of psychic energy that pressed against his consciousness like pollution in clean water. Every time he reached for the Force, he had to filter out the warp's contamination, separating signal from noise. It exhausted him, but Vader had built his strength on adversity. Each day the separation became easier, more instinctive. Inquisitor Vor visited his quarters on the 5th day, data slate in hand. "Your performance aboard the Despoiler's Fang has been reviewed by the Ordo Malleus. 12 Chaos Space Marines dead, 1 Chaos Sorcerer eliminated. The ship's reactor sabotaged, resulting in catastrophic warp breach that consumed the remaining fleet elements." He set the data slate down. "Impressive. Suspiciously impressive. I told you I have destroyed capital ships before, and I'm beginning to believe you." Vor leaned against the wall, studying Vader with clinical interest. "But here's what troubles me. Vexaron the Thrice-Damned was a veteran of the Long War. He'd corrupted 17 worlds, commanded demon legions, survived 3 separate inquisitorial purges. And you killed him in approximately 4 minutes. Your point. My point is that warriors of such power don't fall easily, which means either you're far more dangerous than you appear, or Chaos wanted him dead and used you to do it. Vor's hand rested casually on his bolt pistol. So which is it, Lord Vader? Are you a weapon I can aim, or a weapon that's already been aimed at me? Vader turned from the viewport where he'd been watching the warp's madness churn outside reality's thin membrane. The sorcerer offered me everything your chaos gods promise. Power, freedom from pain, resurrection of the dead. I refused. Then I killed him. What more proof do you require? I require you to meet the High Lords of Terra and submit to examination by the Emperor's own psychic choir. If you survive that, I'll believe you're not chaos-tainted. Vor pushed off from the wall. Until then, you remain a valuable asset under close observation. Cooperate, and you might find the Imperium has uses for someone of your talents. Resist. He left the threat unspoken. Vader allowed himself a moment of dark amusement. Another government trying to control him. Another collection of politicians who thought power came from position rather than strength. I will meet your high lords, but understand this, Inquisitor. I am not your weapon. I am a temporary ally with shared enemies, nothing more. For now, that's enough. Terra itself took Vader's breath away, though he would never admit it. The capital of a million-world Imperium was a hive world beyond anything the Galactic Empire had constructed. Coruscant had been a city-planet, yes, but Terra was a monument to 10,000 years of endless, crushing bureaucracy and religious devotion. Hive spires stretched into the stratosphere. Entire continents were covered in administrative buildings, each one processing paperwork for distant systems. The sky was choked with orbital traffic, defense platforms, monitoring stations, and the massive bulk of ancient weapon systems that could crack planets. And above it all, visible even from orbit, the Imperial Palace sprawled across what had once been the Himalayan mountain range. It was a fortress cathedral city unto itself, larger than some nations, bristling with defenses that made the Death Star's weapons look primitive. The God Emperor resides within, Vor explained, as their shuttle descended toward a landing platform the size of a spaceport. Seated upon the golden throne, sustaining the astronomicon that allows warp travel across the galaxy. 1,000 psychers are sacrificed daily to maintain his power. Their souls burn like candles before his divine radiance. Vader processed this horror with cold calculation. The Empire had been brutal, but this was industrial-scale soul sacrifice as government policy. And you worship him for this? He protects humanity from extinction. We sacrifice the few to save the many. It is the only mathematics that matters in the 41st millennium. They were met by a delegation that made Vader reassess the Imperium's power structure. Lord Commander Militant Veritas stood in full ceremonial armor, flanked by a squad of Adeptus Custodes, golden-armored warriors who radiated lethal competence even to force senses. An ecclesiarch in crimson robes dripping with purity seals watched Vader with barely concealed hostility. And behind them, barely visible in the shadows, psychers whose power made the air shimmer with barely controlled energy. Lord Vader, Veritas began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You stand before the High Lords of Terra, representatives of the God Emperor's will. You have demonstrated capability against Chaos forces. You claim to serve no master. These facts place you in a unique position, neither ally nor enemy, neither human nor Xenos. I am human, Vader interrupted. Enhanced, altered, but human nonetheless. The ecclesiarch scoffed. Human. You reek of darkness. Your soul, if you possess one, is stained black with murder and betrayal. We should burn you at the stake and offer your ashes to the Emperor. Cardinal Matthias, please, Veritas said with strained patience. Then to Vader. The ecclesiarchy is enthusiastic in their devotion, but But their concern is valid. Your power operates outside theological boundaries. You resist chaos corruption, yet wield abilities that suggest you've already fallen to darkness. Vader felt the weight of their combined attention. The custodes ready to kill him if he twitched wrong. The psychers prepared to burn his mind. The politicians calculating whether he was asset or threat. He had stood before Palpatine countless times, feeling this same pressure. The Emperor had used fear and authority to bend Vader to his will, knowing that without Padme, without purpose, Vader would accept any chain offered. But that was before. Before learning that masters lied, before discovering that loyalty earned only betrayal. I understand your concern, Vader said slowly. You have fought for 10,000 years to maintain your Imperium. You've sacrificed billions to keep your species alive. And now something appears that doesn't fit your classifications. Dangerous, powerful, outside your control. He stepped forward, and every weapon in the room tracked him. But I am not your enemy. I am simply displaced, lost, seeking a way home to my own galaxy. And if there is no way home, Veritas asked quietly. Vader met his gaze through the mask. Then I will forge my own path, with or without your Imperium's blessing. Silence stretched. Then Veritas exchanged glances with the other High Lords present. Some silent communication passed between them. The Emperor protects, Veritas said finally, and occasionally he provides. We will grant you provisional status, sanctioned operative under inquisitorial oversight. You will serve when called upon. In exchange, we provide resources, information, and access to forge worlds that might help you understand the dimensional breach that brought you here. And if I refuse this generous offer? The Custodes' guardian spears hummed to active status. The Psyker's eyes began to glow. Cardinal Matthias smiled like a predator. Veritas's expression remained neutral. Then we erase you from existence and dissect whatever remains. Choose quickly, Lord Vader. The Emperor's patience is infinite. Ours is not. Vader weighed his options. Fight his way out, possible but costly. Submit completely, unacceptable. Or accept a temporary arrangement while gathering strength and knowledge. The third option, always. I accept your terms, Vader said. For now. Pragmatic, I appreciate that. Veritas actually smiled. Welcome to the Imperium of Man, Lord Vader. Try not to start any rebellions. We have quite enough of those already. As the delegation dispersed, Vader caught something through the Force. A massive presence deeper in the palace. Ancient, powerful, barely alive but sustained by incomprehensible will. The God Emperor himself, perhaps, still clinging to existence after 10 millennia. For just a moment, Vader felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Pity. Here was another father figure, another authority, another being of immense power, reduced to immobility and endless suffering. Perhaps he and this Emperor had more in common than he'd thought. 6 months. That's how long Vader served the Imperium before he understood its fatal flaw. Not weakness in military might or lack of resources, but an ideological rigidity that made the Empire's bureaucracy look flexible. His first mission under inquisitorial oversight took him to Hive World Secundus, where a cult worshipping something called the Star Father had infected 3 billion workers. Inquisitor Vor's orders were explicit. Purge the heretics, all of them, virus bombing from orbit if necessary. Vader had investigated first. The cult preached equality, fair working conditions, and freedom from the Imperium's crushing tithes. Their Star Father was a fabrication. No chaos taint, no Xenos influence, just desperate people creating hope from nothing. They're not corrupted, Vader reported. They're starving. Give them adequate rations and reasonable work hours, and the cult dies on its own. Vor's response was cold. Heresy is heresy. The method of its erasure is your only discretion. Vader had refused. The Imperium virus bombed the hive anyway. 3 billion souls dead in 6 hours. His second mission sent him against an Orc Wa, threatening a Forge world. That one he completed with ruthless efficiency. Orcs were warriors born, living only for violence. Killing them was mercy by their own standards. 30,000 greenskins dead, their war boss executed by lightsaber through the skull. The Mechanicus had offered him a commendation and proposed capturing his lightsaber for study. Vader declined. They insisted. He'd destroyed 3 of their servo skulls and left. His third mission broke whatever patience he still possessed. A planetary governor on Aristos Prime had requested independence, not rebellion, not heresy, simply autonomous governance while still paying tithes. The Imperium's response was to make an example. Vader was ordered to execute the governor's entire bloodline, children included. He'd walked into the throne room where the family waited, Imperial guards flanking them with loaded bolters. The governor's youngest daughter, barely 6 years old, had looked at him with terrified eyes. Vader saw Padme, saw the younglings in the Jedi Temple, saw every atrocity he'd committed in Palpatine's name. No, he said simply, turning to leave. The Imperial commander present had been shocked. Lord Vader, you have direct orders from... Vader force-choked him unconscious and walked out. The family lived. The planet got its independence. And Vader earned an official censure from the High Lords of Terra. Now he stood in an abandoned section of Terra's Underhive, the kilometers-deep network of forgotten cities beneath the Imperial Palace. This meeting had been arranged through intermediaries, encrypted Vox channels, and careful application of force persuasion on record keepers. The woman who emerged from the shadows wore the robes of an administratum clerk, but moved with a soldier's grace. Lord Vader, I'm surprised you came. You claim to represent an alternative to the Imperium's madness. I'm listening. She pulled back her hood, revealing augmetic eyes and scars that spoke of violence survived. My name is Castellan Raya. I represent, let's call them concerned parties. Imperial Guard commanders tired of throwing soldiers into meat grinders for bureaucratic pride. Planetary governors who want to feed their people without being labeled heretics. Even some Mechanicus Forge masters who think technology should advance rather than stagnate. She studied him carefully. We've watched you, Lord Vader. Seen you question orders, refuse atrocities. You're not like the Inquisition's usual dogs. What do you want from me? Nothing yet. Just planting seeds. Raya produced a data slate, encrypted with security protocols that looked sophisticated even to Vader's trained eye. This contains locations of hidden supply caches, safe houses, communication channels. If you ever decide the Imperium's cure is worse than the diseases it fights, you'll have options. Vader took the data slate but didn't activate it. You're asking me to commit treason against the only human government in this galaxy. Why would I risk that? Because you already have, Raya said simply. You spared that family on Aristos Prime. Word spreads, even through official channels trying to suppress it. You're already marked as potentially unreliable. It's only a matter of time before Vor or another Inquisitor decides you're too dangerous to control. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. We don't want to overthrow the Imperium. That's impossible and would doom humanity. We just want it to be less monstrous. Small changes, incremental progress, saving who we can, when we can. It reminded Vader of his early justifications serving Palpatine. Small compromises, necessary evils. The slow slide into damnation paved with good intentions, but also of what he'd failed to do. Speak up, refuse orders, draw a line before it was too late. "I'll consider your offer," Vader said, pocketing the data slate. "But I make no promises. That's all I ask." Raya pulled her hood back up. "One more thing. There's a listening post in the Obscurus sector that's been monitoring unusual dimensional readings, similar to the anomaly that brought you here. If you want to find a way home, that's where I'd start looking." She vanished into the Underhive's darkness before Vader could respond, leaving him alone with choices that would define his place in this universe. His vox bead crackled. Vor's voice. "Lord Vader, we have a situation requiring your immediate attention. A black ship's convoy has been attacked by unknown forces. Thousands of psychers taken. Tracking suggests they're being moved toward the Maelstrom." "Understood. I'm en route." "Good. And Vader, don't make me regret trusting you. The Aristos Prime incident is forgiven. Once. Future insubordination will be treated as treason." The Vox clicked off. Vader stood in the darkness, feeling the weight of conflicting loyalties he'd never asked for. The Imperium expected obedience. Raya's coalition offered purpose. His own goals demanded freedom to act. He'd served one emperor and learned the cost of blind loyalty. He would not make that mistake again. Vader activated his Vox. "Inquisitor, I need full operational discretion on this mission. No oversight, no political officers, no predetermined outcomes." Silence. Then, "Explain." "You want results. I deliver them, but I do it my way, following principles that don't include unnecessary slaughter. Give me that freedom, or find another weapon." More silence. Vader could almost hear Vor's calculations, the value of an asset versus the risk of allowing independence. Finally, "Provisional agreement. Succeed without creating political disasters, and I'll recommend expanded autonomy to the High Lords. Fail, and you'll be declared excommunicate traitorous. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly." Vader made his way back toward the surface levels, his mind already planning the mission ahead. Thousands of psychers taken, resources for some enemy's purpose. In the Imperium, psychers were either shackled or sacrificed. Perhaps whoever took them offered something better, or perhaps something worse. Either way, he would discover the truth and act accordingly. Not as the Imperium's weapon, not as anyone's tool. As Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith, forging his own path through this dark millennium. The journey toward the Maelstrom would take weeks. Plenty of time to study Raya's data slate and consider what kind of power he wanted to build in this universe. The Galactic Empire had fallen. Vader had no illusions about that after months without contact. Palpatine was gone. Luke was probably leading a new Jedi Order, and the galaxy he knew had moved on without him. This universe, though, this universe was broken in ways that created opportunities. Factions warring endlessly, resources squandered on dogma, populations desperate for anyone offering competence instead of fanaticism. Vader had helped Palpatine build an empire once. Perhaps it was time to build something better, something that answered to him alone. The thought should have troubled him. Instead, it felt like the first honest ambition he'd held in decades. High above in the Imperial Palace, monitoring servitors flagged unusual behavioral patterns in Subject Vader's movement records. The reports were automatically routed to Inquisitorial Oversight, where they joined 10,000 other anomalies requiring investigation. In a galaxy of 1,000,000 worlds at war, one potentially disloyal asset barely registered as a priority. That would prove to be a catastrophic miscalculation. The Maelstrom was a warp storm the size of a solar system, a permanent tear in reality where the immaterium bled through into real space, creating a zone where physics became optional and demons walked freely. Ships that entered rarely returned. Those that did brought back crews driven mad or corrupted beyond salvation. Vader stood aboard the strike cruiser Righteous Fury, studying the swirling nightmare through the observation deck's armored viewport. Even from thousands of kilometers away, the storm's presence made his force connections scream warnings. This was wrongness incarnate, a wound in the universe that would never heal. Madness to go in there, Captain Horvath muttered beside him. The naval officer had 40 years of void combat experience, and his augmetic eye kept twitching as it processed the sensor data. The navigators are barely keeping us on course. Another 10,000 kilometers, and we'll lose astronomican contact entirely. We'll be blind. Can you locate the convoy's last known position? Vader asked. Aye. Mining station Epsilon 7, abandoned 15 years ago after Chaos raids. Perfect place for an ambush. Automated defenses still functional, but no Imperial presence. Horvath brought up the tactical display. But here's the problem. To reach it, we have to enter the Maelstrom's outer boundaries. Even with Geller fields at full strength, we're looking at potential demonic manifestation, temporal distortion, maybe worse. Then we go in fast, extract the Psychers if they're alive, destroy the enemy if possible, retreat immediately. Horvath laughed without humor. You make it sound simple. It is simple. The execution is merely difficult. 6 hours later, Vader led a strike team through the Maelstrom's outer edge aboard a gun cutter designed for rapid insertion. The transition was immediate and nauseating. Reality twisted. The viewport showed colors that didn't exist in normal space. Time felt elastic, seconds stretching, minutes compressing. The 20 stormtroopers in the hold maintained discipline through prayer and chemical conditioning. Vader maintained control through raw force discipline, keeping his consciousness anchored to his body, even as the warp tried to pull it loose. Approaching Epsilon 7, the pilot reported, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Augurs show multiple contacts, ship signatures, Throne of Terra. They're not Imperial or Chaos. Unknown classification. The machine spirits can't identify them. Through the viewport, Vader saw the mining station, a massive orbital platform bristling with ancient weaponry and processing facilities. But surrounding it were ships that made his breath catch. They were sleek, too sleek. Organic curves mixed with crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light. Technology that was simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced, built by a civilization that understood principles the Imperium had forgotten or never discovered. Eldari, Inquisitor Vor's voice crackled over the vox from the Righteous Fury. Eldar Xenos, ancient enemies of humanity. They must have ambushed the black ships for the Psychers. His voice dropped into barely controlled rage. Orders stand, Lord Vader. Recover our property, or ensure the Xenos cannot use them. By any means necessary. Vader studied the ships, reaching out through the Force. He felt purpose, ancient sadness, desperate calculation. These weren't raiders or pirates. This was a carefully planned operation with specific goals. I'm going to make contact, Vader announced. You will do no such thing, Vor snapped. Xenos are not negotiated with. They are purged. That is Imperial doctrine dating back 10,000 years. Your doctrine has led to 10,000 years of endless war. Perhaps it's time to try something different. Vader. He cut the Vox link. The gun cutter touched down on Epsilon 7's main hangar, the ancient docking clamps accepting it with groaning reluctance. Vader disembarked with his stormtroopers, lightsaber ready, but not ignited. The hangar was cavernous, filled with forgotten mining equipment and dust that had settled undisturbed for over a decade. Then they arrived. The Eldari emerged from the shadows like living art, tall, inhumanly graceful figures in armor that seemed to shift colors with the light. Their weapons were elegant curves of wraithbone and psycho-reactive crystals. And leading them was a figure whose presence made even Vader's force senses pause with recognition. She wore armor in shades of deep crimson and black, a gem glowing on her forehead. Her face was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, perfect, deadly, ageless. When she spoke, her Gothic carried an accent that suggested her kind had been speaking it before the Imperium existed. Monkey warrior, I am Farseer Taldir of Craftworld Ulthway. You carry power that does not belong to this universe. Interesting. Her psychic presence brushed against his mind, testing, analyzing. You are not corrupted by She Who Thirsts. More interesting still, Vader's stormtroopers aimed their hellguns. The Eldari's weapons tracked in response. One wrong word, and this would become a bloodbath. You attacked an Imperial convoy, Vader said carefully. Took Psychers under sanctioned protection. The Imperium demands their return. The Imperium. Taldir's tone carried millennia of contempt. Your crude empire sacrifices 1,000 psychically gifted souls daily to sustain a corpse on a golden chair. We saved them from that fate. They will be taught control, discipline, purpose, given lives instead of serving as cattle for slaughter. You cannot keep them. The Imperium will hunt you across the galaxy. Let them try. We are Eldari. We sailed the stars when your species still lived in caves. Taldir stepped closer, her eyes examining Vader with uncomfortable intensity. But you are different. You question your master's orders. I can sense it. The doubt, the growing realization that perhaps the Imperium's brutality is unnecessary. Vader felt the manipulation attempt. This Xenos was trying to drive a wedge between him and his temporary allies. Classic divide and conquer tactics. Yet her words carried uncomfortable truth. What would you have me do? Vader asked, genuinely curious. Allow you to simply take them. I would have you open your eyes. Taldir gestured, and hololithic images appeared in the air, scenes of horror. Psychers being force-marched onto black ships, children screaming as they were torn from families, the Golden Throne's soul furnace consuming desperate minds. This is what you defend. This is the Imperium's treatment of those born with gifts they did not choose. We offer them sanctuary, training, life. Your empire offers only death. Behind Vader, one of his stormtroopers whispered prayers. Another was weeping behind his rebreather. They'd never seen these images, classified inquisitorial records showing the reality of Psyker tithe collection. Vader had seen similar atrocities under Palpatine. Order 66, the Jedi younglings, Alderaan burning, every crime justified by necessity, by order, by the greater good. The Imperium claims your kind are treacherous, Vader said slowly. That you manipulate and betray. That allowing you to leave with these Psychers would be tactical suicide. And yet you hesitate. Taldir's expression shifted into something almost resembling respect. You are strong enough to kill me and my warriors, skilled enough to fight your way to the Psychers. But you do not, because you recognize that sometimes, Monkey, the enemy of your enemy is simply someone fighting the same war from a different perspective. Vader's hand moved to his lightsaber. Every stormtrooper tensed. The Eldari prepared to unleash psychic fury and shuriken fire. Then Vader lowered his hand. Take your students, he said quietly. Train them well. Give them the lives your Imperium never would. Taldir's eyes widened fractionally, genuine surprise from a being who claimed to see the future. You would commit treason for strangers? I would refuse to commit murder when alternatives exist. There's a difference. The Imperium will call you heretic for this. The Imperium calls many things heresy. I'm beginning to think that says more about them than their enemies. Taldir studied him for a long moment. Then she bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between warriors. Perhaps there is hope for your species yet, Darth Vader. The Eldari will remember this mercy. The Xenos withdrew like ghosts, taking the rescued Psykers with them. Their ships departed the station in perfect formation, vanishing into the Maelstrom's madness. Vader stood alone in the hangar, surrounded by his stormtroopers, who now looked at him with expressions somewhere between awe and terror. "Sergeant," Vader said to the squad leader, "what are you going to report?" The sergeant was quiet for a long moment. Then, "The Xenos ambushed us. We fought hard, but they escaped into the warp before we could secure the Psykers. Lord Vader killed 3 of their leaders personally before tactical retreat was necessary." Vader nodded. "Loyalty bought not through fear, but through shared truth. Good. Now we return to the righteous fury and prepare for the Inquisitor's questions." As the gun cutter lifted off, Vader accessed Castellan Raya's encrypted data slate. If he was going to commit treason, he might as well commit to it properly. The Imperium had its chance to earn his loyalty. They'd wasted it with dogma and pointless cruelty. Now it was time to forge something new. The inquisitorial investigation lasted 3 weeks. Vor interrogated every stormtrooper, ran every scan, reviewed every second of tactical footage. The evidence supported Vader's story, barely. The sergeant's testimony held under psychic examination. The tactical data showed heavy Eldari resistance. Only the most paranoid reading would suggest deliberate betrayal. Vor was nothing if not paranoid. "You're lying," the Inquisitor said flatly, standing in Vader's quarters aboard the Eternal Vigilance. "I don't know how, but I know you let those Xenos escape. The question is why?" Vader remained seated, his breathing steady through the respirator. "Your evidence says otherwise. Evidence can be manipulated. I've been doing this for 70 years, Vader. I know when a mission report smells wrong." Vor leaned against the wall, his scarred face thoughtful. "But here's the interesting part. I don't actually care." That got Vader's attention. "Explain." "The Imperium is drowning in enemies, chaos, orcs, Tyranids, Necrons waking from their tombs. We lose 1,000 worlds every year, and reconquer half that through rivers of blood." Vor pulled out a flask, taking a long drink. "You're dangerous, unpredictable, and probably treasonous, but you're also effective. You killed Vexeron the Thrice Damned. You've eliminated threats that would have cost me thousands of soldiers, so I'm making a calculated decision. Which is? I'm going to pretend I believe your story. Officially, you executed your mission within acceptable parameters. The lost Psykers are unfortunate, but survivable." Vor's eyes hardened. "Unofficially, I'm watching you. Every move, every decision. And the moment you become more dangerous than useful, I will end you. Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly." Vor left without another word. Vader sat in silence, processing the conversation. The Inquisitor was playing a deeper game than simple loyalty enforcement. He was allowing Vader Rope to either hang himself or prove his worth. Sophisticated manipulation, but manipulation nonetheless. The data slate from Raya chimed softly, an encrypted message. Vader activated it. "Listening post Tyros 9, Obscurus Sector. Dimensional anomaly readings confirmed. Mechanicus presence minimal. They don't understand what they're monitoring. I've arranged clearance under inquisitorial authority. This is your chance. R." Vader looked out the viewport at the star-filled void. Somewhere out there was a way home, back to his own galaxy, back to Luke, back to the possibility of redemption he'd glimpsed before being torn away. But what waited here? The Imperium would never stop watching him. Vor's understanding was temporary. Eventually, he'd become too inconvenient, too independent. They'd try to eliminate him, and he'd have to kill an Inquisitor, which would make him an official enemy of the largest human empire in existence. Unless he built something strong enough to stand against them. Not rebellion. That was suicide. But independence. A power base answerable to no one but himself. His Vox speed crackled. Lord Vader, this is Captain Horvath. We're receiving a distress signal from Imperial Guard forces on Typhon's Gate. They're under siege by combined Chaos and Orc forces. Entire Subsector Command is requesting immediate reinforcement. How long until we can arrive? 18 hours at maximum warp speed. But Lord Vader, intelligence suggests both the Despoiler's Black Legion and Warboss Grimtooth's Wa are present. This isn't a skirmish. This is a full invasion. Vader accessed tactical data on Typhon's Gate. Strategic fortress world guarding 3 major warp routes. Population, 12 million. Imperial Guard. Garrison, 4 regiments. Current enemy estimate, 100,000 combatants and rising. If Typhon's Gate fell, the entire subsector would collapse. Millions would die. The Imperium would lose critical territory. And in the chaos, opportunities would present themselves. Prepare the fleet, Vader commanded. We depart immediately and contact any loyalist forces in the sector. Tell them Darth Vader is en route. The Imperium protects, my lord. No, Vader said quietly. I protect. The Imperium simply takes credit. Typhon's Gate burned when they arrived. Orbital defenses had fallen. Chaos ships bombarded population centers, while Orc rock transports crashed through atmosphere like meteors. The planet's surface was a nightmare of 3-way warfare. Imperial Guard holding fortress positions, Chaos cultists and traitor marines pushing from the east, Orcs pouring from drop sites to the west, and caught in the middle, civilians dying by the thousands. Vader stood in the Righteous Fury's strategium, surrounded by Guard commanders arguing over Vox channels. Fall back to the primary hive. We can't abandon the shield generators. The Orcs have broken through at Junction 77. Where are the reinforcements? Where is the Emperor's mercy? Vader silenced them all with a single word. Listen. The Vox channels fell silent. I am Lord Vader. I have operational command by inquisitorial authority. These are your orders. 1st Regiment holds the Eastern Fortress line against Chaos. 2nd and 3rd Regiments redeploy to Western sectors to blunt the Orc advance. 4th Regiment evacuates civilians to defensible positions. No arguments, no debate. Obey or be executed for cowardice. Confirm. One by one, the commanders confirmed. Vader's reputation had preceded him. Stories of the warrior who killed Chaos sorcerers and walked away from warp storms. They didn't love him, but they feared failure more. Captain Horvath, I need orbital support coordinating with ground forces. Precision strikes only, no civilian casualties. My lord, standard doctrine for siege situations authorizes collateral damage if... I am changing doctrine. Follow my orders. Vader descended to the planet's surface in a Thunderhawk, accompanied by 100 stormtroopers and a detachment of Skitarii Rangers the Mechanicus had grudgingly provided. They landed in the midst of hell. Orcs swarmed over broken fortifications, their crude weapons blazing. Chaos cultists chanted blasphemies while summoning lesser demons. Imperial guardsmen died holding positions with nothing but faith and lace guns. Vader ignited his lightsaber and walked into the firestorm. The Orcs saw him first. A dozen of the greenskin brutes charged, roaring with joy at finding a proper fight. Vader met them with telekinetic fury, ripping one apart at the molecular level, crushing another's skull with focused force pressure, bisecting a third with his blade. The rest died before they understood what killed them. "What's dat?" an Orc knob bellowed, pointing at Vader with a massive power claw. Looks like a fight. Wow! Hundreds of orcs changed direction, abandoning their assault on guard positions to swarm toward this new enemy. Exactly as Vader intended. He was a lightning rod, drawing aggression through his mere presence. His stormtroopers formed firing lines, last bolts, and hellgun rounds cutting down the greenskin tide. The Skitarii added their radium carbines, precision shots finding weak points in orc physiology. But there were too many. Always too many. Vader reached deep into the Force, feeling its resistance in this warp-soaked reality, and pulled. A destroyed Chimera transport lifted into the air, 30 tons of metal and armor rotating like a hammer. He hurled it into the orc formation, crushing dozens in an instant. The orcs loved it. They cheered. This was what they lived for, glorious violence against impossible odds. Their cheering stopped when Vader started truly fighting. He moved through their formation like death incarnate, lightsaber carving through crude armor and thick hide. Every orc that got close found itself force-pushed into others or telekinetically slammed into rubble. His precognition, muffled but functional, kept him ahead of their attacks. His tactical genius, honed through decades of war, let him manipulate their positions. "Oh aye, dis one's proper tough." War boss Grim Tooth himself emerged from the orc mob, a towering brute in mega armor, wielding a power claw the size of a man. "Finally, a git-wat can give us a real scrap," the war boss charged. Vader waited until the last second, then sidestepped and severed the power claw's hydraulic lines. Grim Tooth roared in confusion as his weapon sparked and died. Vader's follow-up strike took the war boss's head. The orcs' morale broke. Without their leader, the war's psychic energy dissipated. They scattered, fighting each other as much as the humans. "Eastern sector," Vader commanded. "Chaos forces advancing." His forces pivoted with professional efficiency, redeploying toward the Chaos threat. But something was wrong. Vader's danger sense screamed warnings. Then he felt it, a massive warp presence emerging. Reality tore open above the battlefield, and through the rift came something that made even veteran guardsmen scream. A greater demon of Khorne. Blood God made manifest. 30 feet of brass armor, muscle, and rage, wielding an axe that wept blood. And standing beside it, directing cultist forces with cold efficiency, was someone Vader recognized from intelligence briefings. Abaddon the Despoiler. War Master of Chaos, the Imperium's greatest traitor. The ancient warrior in black Terminator armor locked eyes with Vader across the burning battlefield. "So," Abaddon's voice carried across the Vox channels, amplified by dark sorcery. "The Imperium has found itself a new champion. How disappointing. I was hoping for a challenge." The greater demon roared, and the sound was more than noise. It was fury weaponized, rage that bypassed ears and stabbed directly into souls. Imperial guardsmen dropped their weapons and fled. Even the stormtroopers hesitated, their indoctrination warring against primal terror. Vader felt the demon's presence like acid on his force senses. This was warp energy given form, emotion made flesh. Everything unnatural about this universe concentrated into a single killing machine. Where Vexeron had been powerful, this was overwhelming. Where lesser demons had been dangerous, this was apocalyptic. "Fall back," Vader commanded his forces. "This one is mine." "Lord Vader, you can't," the stormtrooper sergeant began. "I said fall back." The Force carried Vader's voice with enough weight to override their fear. His troops retreated to defensive positions, leaving him alone on the battlefield between the demon and the Imperial lines. The greater demon of Khorne charged, each footfall cracking ferrocrete. Its axe swept down in an arc that would bisect a tank. Vader rolled beneath the strike, his lightsaber scoring a line across the demon's brass-plated shin. The creature barely noticed. Pain was pleasure to Khorne's servants. A massive fist caught Vader in the chest, sending him tumbling through debris. His armor's integrity held, but his respirator sparked. Warning lights flashed across his chest panel. He pushed himself up, fighting the pain of cracked ribs that shouldn't have been possible through his cybernetic reinforcement. This universe's demons weren't bound by physics. They operated on belief and emotion. The creature was strong because it embodied strength. Fast because it was rage incarnate. Vader would have to fight it on different terms. He reached into the Force, finding the calm center he'd neglected for decades. Not the dark side's raw power, but the discipline Obi-Wan had tried to teach him. Control, precision, using minimal energy for maximum effect. The demon charged again. This time, Vader didn't dodge, he redirected. Telekinetic force caught the axe mid-swing and guided it past him, using the creature's momentum against itself. The blade buried itself in rubble. Vader's lightsaber found the joint between shoulder and arm, cutting deep. The demon howled and backhanded him 50 feet. Vader crashed through a destroyed building, ferrocrete raining down. His respirator wheezed, struggling to maintain pressure. One of his cybernetic legs sparked, damage to the servo motors. He was dying. Slowly. The demon was too strong, too durable. Every exchange cost him more than he could afford. Then Abaddon's voice echoed across the battlefield. Impressive for a mortal, but futile. You cannot kill a demon with physical weapons. It will regenerate until you collapse from exhaustion, then feast on your soul. Vader pushed himself up again, slower this time. Abaddon was right. Traditional combat wouldn't work, but the Force wasn't traditional combat. The demon approached, confident in its immortality. Vader waited until it was close enough to feel its breath, smell the copper stench of infinite bloodshed. Then he did something he'd never attempted before. He reached into the Force and pulled at the demon's essence. Not its physical form, its connection to the warp, the invisible tether that anchored it to reality. In this universe, such creatures existed because emotion sustained them. Cut that connection, and they dispersed. The demon screamed, a sound of genuine confusion. It could feel itself being severed from the warp, dragged away from its sustaining rage. Vader poured everything into the effort. Decades of Force discipline, power earned through suffering, will forged in darkness. The demon's form began to flicker, to fade, to disperse back into the raw warp energy it had been made from. Impossible! Abaddon's roar carried shock and fury. The War Master raised his demon sword, Draknian, and began striding across the battlefield. You dare banish one of Khorne's chosen? I will tear your soul from that pathetic metal body and... Artillery fire from orbit interrupted him. Precision lance strikes, coordinated by Captain Horvath, hammered the Chaos positions. Abaddon was forced to retreat behind corrupted shields as the Imperial Navy demonstrated that air superiority still mattered, even against Chaos. The demon dissolved completely, its essence screaming back into the warp. Vader collapsed to one knee, his respirator laboring. Every system in his armor was damaged or failing. His connection to the Force felt strained, stretched thin by the effort of manipulating warp-connected entities. Stormtroopers rushed to his position, forming a protective perimeter. Lord Vader! Medical assistance inbound! No time. Vader forced himself standing, leaning heavily on his lightsaber like a cane. Across the battlefield, Chaos forces were retreating through warp portals. The orcs had scattered. The siege was breaking. Secure the fortress. Evacuate the wounded. I want casualty reports within the hour. My lord, you need treatment. I need to finish this war. For 3 more days, Vader commanded the defense of Typhon's Gate. He coordinated guard regiments with brutal efficiency. He personally led strikes against Chaos strongpoints. He used his force abilities to detect ambushes before they materialized. And through it all, he refused evacuation, refused rest, refused anything but total victory. When the last Chaos ship fled the system and the final Orc was burned from the planet's surface, Typhon's Gate had survived. 12 million civilians saved, 4 Imperial Guard regiments intact, strategic position maintained. The cost, 18,000 Imperial soldiers dead, 40,000 wounded, 3 hive sectors destroyed beyond recovery. But they had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. Vader stood in the planetary governor's throne room, now converted to a command center, surrounded by guard commanders, Mechanicus tech priests, and inquisitorial representatives. They looked at him with expressions he hadn't seen directed at him in decades. Respect, gratitude, something approaching reverence. Lord Vader, Governor Tychus said, his voice shaking. You saved this world, saved millions of souls. The Emperor's light shines through you. The Emperor had nothing to do with it, Vader said quietly. Your soldiers fought, your people endured. I simply gave them a chance to win. Tychus seemed confused by the response, as if unable to process victory without divine intervention. Vader understood. The Imperium's propaganda had convinced its people they couldn't succeed without their god's blessing. Initiative, competence, these were forgotten virtues. Inquisitor Vor materialized from the crowd, his power-armored form imposing even among the military brass. Impressive work, Lord Vader, though your methods remain unorthodox, banishing a greater demon without sanctified weapons, coordinating multiple regiments without proper ministorum oversight, refusing medical treatment to maintain command presence. His expression was unreadable. You either have a death wish or ambitions beyond simple service. Perhaps both. Vor actually smiled at that. The High Lords will want a full report. Your actions here will be studied, analyzed, probably used as propaganda. The Emperor's Dark Angel, they'll call you. His avenging blade. You've become a symbol whether you want it or not. Vader felt the weight of that assessment. A symbol. A tool for Imperial propaganda. The same trap Palpatine had used. Make him the face of order, then control him through his own reputation. I didn't save this world for propaganda purposes, Vader said. I saved it because the alternative was millions dead. And that's what makes you dangerous, Vor replied quietly, so only Vader could hear. You actually believe in something beyond the system. You think competence matters more than dogma. You fight for principles instead of orders. He leaned closer. That makes you either the Imperium's greatest asset or its next great heretic. History will decide which. Before Vader could respond, his Vox speed crackled with Castellan Raya's encrypted frequency. Listening post Tyros 9 is secured. The dimensional anomaly is still active. But Lord Vader, there's something else. The readings suggest your universe and this one are drifting apart, like tectonic plates. Whatever window brought you here is closing. If you want to go home, you have months at most, maybe weeks. Vader processed this information while maintaining his impassive facade before the assembled officers. Time was running out. Soon he'd have to choose, return to his own galaxy or commit fully to this one. Return meant facing Luke, confronting his failures, possibly finding redemption or falling further into darkness. Staying meant building something new, using everything he'd learned, from the Jedi, from Palpatine, from decades of war, to forge a power independent of the Imperium's crushing bureaucracy. Governor Tychus, Vader said, his voice carrying across the command center. "This world survived because your people fought with courage and discipline. They deserve better than to simply return to the Imperium's grinding oppression. I propose an arrangement." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to him. "Typhon's Gate will maintain its Imperial tithes and allegiance, but in exchange for saving your world, I claim the right of sanctuary here, a base of operations, resources for my missions, and most importantly, autonomy from Ministorum oversight for your military forces. You will train soldiers properly, not through prayer and punishment, but through competence and tactical excellence." Tychus glanced nervously at the inquisitorial representatives. "Lord Vader, I don't have authority to grant such." "Then I will speak to those who do." Vader turned to Vor. "Take me to Terra. I will negotiate directly with the High Lords, and if they refuse, I will establish my base elsewhere. There are plenty of worlds desperate for competent defenders." Vor studied him for a long, calculating moment. Then, "You're playing a dangerous game, Vader. One wrong move, and you'll be declared excommunicate traitorous." "I've been playing dangerous games my entire life, Inquisitor. I'm still here. My enemies are not." The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Vor laughed, genuine amusement mixed with dark respect. "Very well. Let's see if the High Lords are wise enough to accept your terms, or stupid enough to make an enemy of the man who just saved an entire subsector." As the command center erupted into nervous chatter, Vader stood alone at the center, feeling the weight of decisions that would define his place in this universe. The path home was closing. The path forward remained uncertain. But for the first time since Mustafar, Darth Vader felt something he'd almost forgotten. Purpose that answered to no master but himself. 3 months passed in negotiation, political maneuvering, and careful demonstration of capabilities. The High Lords of Terra argued endlessly. Some saw Vader as a threat to Imperial doctrine. Others recognized him as an irreplaceable asset in an age of infinite war. Inquisitor Vor's advocacy, combined with detailed reports of Typhon's Gate's salvation, eventually tipped the scales. The compromise was unprecedented. Lord Vader would be granted the title of Prefectus Duli, independent commander, with authority to operate outside standard Imperial chain of command. He would maintain a base on Typhon's Gate, train forces according to his methods, and respond to threats as he deemed appropriate. In exchange, he would accept occasional inquisitorial oversight and provide military support when the Imperium faced existential crises. It was more freedom than any non-Astartes commander had possessed in millennia. It was also a leash long enough to hang himself if he proved disloyal. Vader accepted the terms. Then he traveled to listening post Tyros 9 in the Obscurus sector. The facility was a forgotten relic on the edge of the Imperium's mapped territories, a monitoring station built to track warp storms, but now largely automated. The Mechanicus presence consisted of 2 tech priests and a dozen servitors, all of whom Vader dismissed with inquisitorial authority. Alone in the station's core chamber, Vader stood before instruments that tracked the dimensional anomaly. The readings were clear, a rift between universes, unstable and collapsing. On the other side, his galaxy, his universe. Luke, the possibility of redemption or final damnation. All he had to do was step through. Vader's hand moved toward the activation mechanism. One decision. One moment that would define everything that followed. He thought of Luke, young, powerful, believing in redemption even for a monster like his father. Would Vader return to face that hope, to potentially corrupt it or be saved by it? He thought of the Imperium, brutal, dogmatic, but fighting genuine evil with every resource they possessed. A civilization that needed reform desperately, but would destroy anyone who tried too radically. he thought of Typhon's Gate, where soldiers now trained under competent instruction rather than blind faith, where civilians looked at Imperial authority and saw protection instead of oppression. Small changes, incremental progress, the seeds of something better. Castellan Raya's words echoed in his memory. We just want it to be less monstrous. Vader stood at the threshold between universes for 5 full minutes. The Force whispered possibilities, futures branching in infinite directions depending on this single choice. Then he deactivated the dimensional rift mechanism. The readings spiked once, protested, then fell silent as the connection between universes severed completely. The gateway home collapsed, sealing shut with finality that left no room for doubt or second-guessing. Vader stood in the sudden silence, alone in a universe not his own, having made a choice that could never be unmade. "I'm sorry, Luke," he whispered to the void. "But this galaxy needs what I've learned. These people deserve a chance at something better than 10,000 years of stagnation and suffering. Perhaps this is my penance, not redemption through your forgiveness, but through building something worthy with my own hands." He activated his Vox link. "Captain Horvath, prepare the fleet. We're returning to Typhon's Gate." "Acknowledged, Lord Vader. Welcome home." Home. The word felt strange, foreign, yet also oddly appropriate. Darth Vader walked from the listening post toward his waiting Thunderhawk, black cape billowing in the station's recycled atmosphere. Behind him, the instruments monitoring the dimensional rift registered nothing but empty space where a gateway to another universe had briefly existed. Ahead of him, an entire galaxy at war, 1,000,000 worlds burning, countless factions battling for supremacy, and an Imperium desperately clinging to survival through faith and fanaticism. He was one man, one broken, augmented, fallen warrior from a universe that no longer mattered. But he was also Darth Vader, and he had toppled empires before. The 41st millennium had no idea what it had inherited. A Dark Lord who served no master. A warrior who refused both Chaos's corruption and the Imperium's blind obedience. A force of will that would carve its own path through this age of darkness. On Typhon's Gate, soldiers trained with new discipline. In the underhives of Terra, Castellan Raya received encrypted confirmation that her most valuable asset had committed fully to their cause. In the warp, entities that styled themselves gods watched with interest as a new variable entered the eternal game. And somewhere in the void between stars, Inquisitor Vor reviewed reports on Lord Vader's activities and made a note in his private journal. Subject has fully invested in this reality, no longer seeking escape. Implications uncertain. Recommend continued observation. Asset remains valuable. Threat assessment catastrophic if turned enemy. Conclusion: maintain alliance at all costs. Darth Vader stood on Typhon's Gate's command platform, looking out over a fortress world that had survived impossible odds. Soldiers saluted as he passed. Civilians whispered his name with something approaching hope. And in the distance, the galaxy burned with wars that would never truly end. He had been a slave, a Jedi, an apprentice, a Dark Lord, an enforcer of tyranny. Now he would be something new, a force for competence in an age of madness, neither fully loyal nor fully rebel, carving a path between extremes that both Imperium and Chaos would learn to fear. The Emperor protected, they said, but Darth Vader protected better. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, that made all the difference.